Welcome, welcome. What up, God? What are you doing, man? Chilling like a villain?
I'll tell you this, I definitely feel very welcomed.
Welcome. Imagine I just say that the whole time. Welcome. I'm done. All right, but there's a lot of cool shit going on. A lot of fun stuff for us to talk about. I don't know if you saw this, but Tube Filter. Maybe you go on there, you read some shit. It's like a blog. I read it sometimes. It seems pretty cool. They announced that the metrics came out, and it was a study done by PwC and another accounting firm that showed that podcasting ad sales in 2022 are projected to be $2 billion, and that's expected to double by 2024, which is pretty cool. It just shows you how big the space is getting, and I think that is in large part due to some big name podcasters like Joe Rogan, and then the one Barstool podcast with the girls were fighting. I forget the name of that one. I know you were a big fan of that one, right? And there were a few other ones that kind of popped off that were doing pretty well. So that's pretty cool to see, because the main like barrier to entry to like do any type of media or like platform show is like pretty much non-existent at this point. You just need an internet connection and like, I don't know, I guess decent recording equipment and audio editing stuff. And you don't even really need the visual. You don't have to go too crazy. You don't need like DSLR cameras or anything like that. So it's just so cool to see that more people are getting into the space, and there's a lot of money being invested. Hence, the 2 billion in ad sales, and it's expected to double within the next 2 years. So that's really cool to see. That's very encouraging. And then a large part of that is mostly, I would say, due to the increased presence on like social media, right? Like people have an increased presence on YouTube and I guess Facebook for all the old fuckers out there, Instagram, and then obviously Twitter. So, and Twitter, there's been a lot of funny shit going on. Elon Musk pulled out of that deal. Looks like Twitter has a big problem with bots, and they weren't looking to disclose that. So I'm sure that he's not too thrilled about that. I did hear a rumor that on Twitter, something like 20% of the users were botted and they weren't real. And that number was kind of disputed by Twitter's board and Twitter's internal departments, because they're trying to say that Elon Musk was trying to talk down the price of the stock, and he was obviously trying to negotiate a cheaper price given the state of the economy and how interest rates have kind of come up. So it looks like he could be trying to get a better deal, but it looks like this whole thing is going to end up in court and they're going to be fighting. So we'll see what happens from there. But Twitter is definitely a fascinating and interesting place. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I mean, with this whole Twitter situation, there's a lot of unpredictability of what's going to happen. I saw that Twitter actually they just sued Elon Musk in the Delaware Court of Chancery. So you don't know if basically is he going to be forced to pay the $1 billion breakup fee, or is he going to be forced to pay 44 billion, or is he going to be able to walk away? So the lawsuit, like, it just commenced, and you got Twitter's lawyers and his lawyers going back and forth. Twitter is trying to speed up the trial, and they're trying to like have the court case be as soon as September, and they said they can win the court case in 4 days. They only need 4 days to win the court case, while Elon Musk and his attorney are saying they need more time to get evidence and such, and they want the court case to be in February instead of like around September, October. So basically, we're just at the start of this, and we're trying to see what's actually going to happen. Is it going to be in September, or is it going to be in February? I can't imagine they push up the case to September, because that would give like grounds for an appeal that he wasn't given enough time to review the bot data and get all his evidence in place for the trial. So that's what Twitter's trying to do. They're trying to, like, make sure he's not able to get the evidence. And the longer this goes on, the longer Twitter stock price goes in the gutter, and then it gives Elon Musk an opportunity to make another argument about why he should be able to back out of the deal, which is there's like a clause if the unforeseen circumstances change. So if Twitter's price gets too low, and basically it could get low if basically this suit draws out for a long time, and then there's negative PR or negative financial data in upcoming quarters. Then he could say that there was unforeseen circumstances, the company's conditions changed, and then that could give him another reason to back out of the deal. So that's why Twitter's trying to speed this up and get this court case done as quick as possible and have him pay $44 billion. But I can't see that happening. I think he's going to be able to back out of the deal. I think the most likely scenario is that he's going to have to pay the breakup fee, but still Twitter's going to get screwed out of about $20-25 billion in value. And then basically their best bet is to come to the table and renegotiate with him and get a better price.
Yeah, Twitter's in a world of trouble, and it just seems like they really shot themselves in the foot because a lot of the data, that he went through in the process of going about trying to acquire the company, is now kind of gone public. So it just looks like they're getting really caught and kind of exposed with almost like their pants down in a weird way because they really got exposed for like aggressive censorship and sort of bending the rules of the platform um, to show more like ideological differences and to just ban people with like dissenting opinions. So it became like a weird echo chamber. And also within the algorithm itself, it just seems like there are certain Twitter accounts that get pushed more than others, and obviously they fall within like an ideological scope. And even like in cases of two users with like different political stances, like violating terms of service, it seems that the person whose stance is most closely with Twitter is handed lesser punishment and like a lesser ban or like sentencing, whatever you want to call it, Twitter jail, I guess. But it's just some wild shit to see. But yeah, Twitter is really crazy. Like people kind of get crazy on there, and they do some weird shit on there.
Yeah,
I just it kind of just reminds me of like Elon Musk, like I remember it wasn't too long ago he was even hacked on Twitter. So Twitter has a big problem with bots and hackers, and it seems like their back end programming and coding needs a lot of work. The software engineers need to do a better job because it just seems like a lot of these accounts are very prone to um, particularly even famous people, like their accounts or celebrities, like their accounts are more susceptible to being hacked than like on a lot of other platforms. I mean, you don't really see it too much on Instagram or like any other platforms with more monthly active users. So it's been kind of interesting to see that unfold. And like you said, this whole legal proceeding and the battle, I think Elon will probably end up paying the breakup fee. I can't imagine he loses the case. I can't imagine that Twitter ends up kind of getting the better of him just because he has access to more resources and a lot more money than the company. So I imagine that if he really thought there was a chance that he would have to like buy this company out at an absurd valuation because the judge kind of rules it to be that way, I would imagine that he probably wouldn't care if he spent like 5 or 10 billion on like amazing fucking lawyers or like just spending any amount of money just to be able to get out of the mess. Like I would not be surprised at all. But yeah, Twitter has a big problem with bots and these other fucking users, and they got to
well,
clean that up to survive.
I mean, besides suing him for fulfillment of the contract, they're also suing him for defamation, and they're suing him for disparagement and disparaging their company with the fact that he's making up these false claims about bots and such, which we all know are not false. That they're completely true, and they're saying that he's using this bad faith and spreading this disparagement to investors. So basically, that even if he's not forced to buy the company, they might force him to pay 1 billion, and then there might be some sort of fee or some sort of settlement on the disparagement claim, and how much Twitter gets for him disparaging their company and basically them losing credibility with advertisers and such. Since if this his bot claim is wrong, advertisers question, do I want to advertise on a platform where the bots are 20%, and I'm not getting my message out to people and they're not going to buy my product? Like, that's a big deal if the his claims are false. So Twitter's also suing for disparagement of their company and basically breaching the merger agreement and making these material and accurate representations of their company.
Yeah, that's a main point. That's a really good thing that you brought up. Like even advertising too. Advertising is usually like the first thing to go in like a major downturn or like a recession. That's one of the biggest recession indicators. Once companies start cutting advertising expensing, and Twitter for them especially, like that's their main pipeline of making money. I mean, I know they started with like Twitter Spaces and some of these other initiatives on the platform, but it doesn't seem like they're moving quick enough or innovating quick enough to try and be able to combat what's going on. But I know that you mentioned to me that a lot of different like Twitter accounts were getting hacked, and they've had a big problem with this. But was there something you wanted to mention about? I know you brought this up offline, but it was like with the British Army and Twitter. It's like something happened with them, and you said it was like pretty funny. So I figured it was like worth kind of bringing that up here.
Yeah. So recently, the British Army's Twitter account, which is just at the British Army, on I think it happened on Sunday. Basically, these cyber criminals, or basically these cryptocurrency scammers, they hacked the British Army account, and they were promoting this crypto scam. And basically, the British Army's Twitter account's pretty big and might have about 300,000 followers and such. And basically, they hacked it. They promoted this crypto scam, and they like linked this video that said, "Oh, we can double your crypto investment if you send Bitcoin or Ethereum to this wallet." And we all know how that goes. And then we'll send back double. We all know how that goes. Once you send it over to the wallet, you're not going to get it back. I don't even know how people still fall for that scam. It happens a lot on YouTube too. There'll be like these fake accounts. They'll impersonate whatever your account name on YouTube is. They'll have the same name as you and the same profile picture. And they'll be like, "Oh, I have a crypto advisor, or I have a crypto person that can help you make money. You can make 4% a day," which we all know if you make 4% a day and compound it, you'll be the richest man in the world in fucking like a year. You'll have like $2 trillion, which is it's not even logical. I don't even know how these people fall for it and such.
Yeah, I don't know how people fall for these crypto scams. It's pretty funny though. That's a fucking legendary point. Like at 4%, 365 days in a year, but at 4%, like you're literally talking about like even if you started with a fucking dollar, like bro, 4% a year. Oh my god. Well, 4% a day for a year is. I mean, that's insane. Yeah, you're right. You'd literally be like the richest person on earth. If you started with like 10 grand, you definitely would be. But I wonder what the math would be on a dollar. We'll have to think about that. But no, yeah, these scams are a big problem, and like you said, I don't know how people fall for them. It's almost like the people that they get the calls to their phone, and it's like your extended car warranty has expired, and it's like I get those calls all the time. Like I was joking with someone earlier this week. I was like, I got that call for like the fourth time this week. Like, my fucking my car warranty wore off, and it expired, and now I have to like fucking renew it. And then the other thing was that you also get calls from the IRS. Like apparently everyone owes the IRS, and like the only way to like pay the IRS is with Applebee's gift cards. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but I've had a big problem with the IRS. Like they keep demanding these like fucking Applebee's gift cards from me, and like I don't understand it. Like maybe they're really into getting the wings there or something. Like it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just strange, like how these people fall for these nonsense scams. It seems like they don't even have like a brain cell. But what's weird about this is why would the scammer hack the British Army's account? Like that that just brings like a lot of governmental pressure on you because you're embarrassing the whole country of Britain. Why wouldn't you just? I mean, it doesn't have that many subscribers, whatever you call it on Twitter. You could have hacked a famous person's account. You could have hacked someone else's account and got just as much publicity and just as much money with not as much governmental pressure coming down on you because you basically embarrassed the whole country of Britain. Like the army account, which is supposed to be safe and secure, it's like hacking the fucking U.S. Marine account. Like that you're basically embarrassing the whole country.
Yeah, I think that was the point, though. I think that was the motive, right? To like try and embarrass the country, which makes me think that maybe it was possibly like a government sponsored hacker that hacked the account, right? Because you think about what's going on, like the whole thing with like Russian hackers or like Chinese hackers or North Korean hackers, like that's like a real thing, you know. State sponsored or like government sponsored hacking entities is not a new thing at all. We saw that happen with Sony. Remember Sony, the Sony Pictures one, where Sony was hacked by like North Korean hackers because of the movie The Interview, and like all this shit came out, and they got kind of fucked and they lost a lot of money. Like that was one of the big things that happened with that. So it's not the first time that we've heard of state sponsored hackers like going out and hacking stuff, and that kind of makes sense to me because Britain's like been like a major proponent of like ramping up the offensive in Ukraine and kind of trying to combat Russia that way.
Yeah, I mean, if Russia or North Korea is behind it, I mean, it would make perfect sense. But these NFT scammers, they're all gonna get their hell day. There's gonna be a one day where all these governmental bodies are just gonna come down on all these scammers, and there's gonna be a price to pay for what they're doing. The SEC, all these governmental organizations and such, they take a long time to act and accumulate evidence, but when they do, they're gonna take them all down in one shot. Just like Uber is gonna fucking take down all these fucking rapists that are fucking in their vehicles. They're gonna take them down.
Yeah, we got to really be careful with this one. So yeah, Uber, they're a pretty decent company. I've had my beef with them in the past, like my kind of, I wouldn't say it's like a personal vendetta, but I've had bad drivers, I'll put it that way. And some of these people are just shitheads, but I don't want to really get into that. But Uber, there's big time in the news. Two main things that happen. Uber is being sued by 500 women for SA and kidnapping claims. That's a big thing. SA, if you don't know what that is, it's blank, assault. Okay, so think about that one. We will not say that because apparently that is a no demonetization word. So we will not say the actual phrase, but they're being sued for that. 500 women. That's definitely not good. That's a big problem, and that's over the course of years. So they have a big problem with that. They have to like, I guess I would say, without a doubt, it seems like they should have more thorough background checks. They need to investigate drivers more. I mean, they're really just looking to see that the drivers have licenses, and they're like, okay, go make us money, and then obviously Uber's getting a cut of that money. But the main thing is, I feel like they probably need to have more thorough background checks on drivers.
When you sign up for Uber, right, you have to send a picture of your driver's license. You have to put a picture of you and your profile. So, what kind of driver would be stupid enough to do such a thing when his driver's license, his address, his profile picture is all on the record? And recently we saw with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, we saw like these fake claims come about. So I don't know what kind of individual would be that stupid to basically commit this act when there's a record and there's a paper trail of the person in the car and who it is and who's driving that car and such. This might be, basically a PR campaign funded by basically these traffic cab unions because they're basically being put out of business by this wonderful company of Uber, which is basically democratizing, right, the access to travel and the access to transportation and making it more readily available to all individuals. And I think this whole safety issue, right, is blown totally out of proportion. It's union funded BS. That stands for bullshit. Can I say the word bullshit? Well, I just did. I said bullshit. I don't care if it's a demonetization word. And we're seeing severe drop in ridership among taxi cabs and such. And I think now it's time for these taxi cabs to basically attack all of these companies such as Uber and Lyft because their fucking medallions that they bought in the '80s for $1 million are now fucking worthless.
Right, and the other thing with the medallions is that they were kind of sold by like cities and states and different municipalities. So the price tag of $1 million or whatever the case may be, it's just very silly because the car obviously is not worth that much. They're just overpaying for the license because the government is hitting them over the head. But the main thing to be brought up here with Uber is that also in the news was that they pretty much it's this whole nuance thing, but the Guardian, they've been pretty good with like investigative journalism in the past. They've leaked the whole Edward Snowden story, right, where he leaked the prison program and all these different initiatives that the NSA was doing, where they were just spying on people. But the Guardian came out and they leaked Uber internal documents, and they basically proved that Uber was purposely dispatching drivers to area where the taxi drivers were rioting due to the changes in legislation. So that's interesting shit. And this was mostly in Europe. This was happening. So there were taxi drivers that were rioting in Italy, Belgium, Spain, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. So Uber was dispatching drivers to pick up passengers in those areas, kind of hoping like something would happen and looking to like provoke taxi drivers into attacking them, so they would gain like favorable position with the local municipality and government.
And I think what these women are doing, they're going after a very rich company trying to get a settlement. I think Uber, is not really responsible for these attacks, if there were any attacks. It's the individual, and it's kind of hard to screen everybody and get it right 100% of the time. You said there was only 500 incidents, which is not really that much when there's millions and tens of millions of rides each and every day on the Uber platform. And Uber is really striding to make their app and their vehicles as safe as possible. I know recently they even installed an emergency button. So basically, if you're taking an Uber ride, you could hit the emergency button and it'll automatically call the cops. So that's if you're getting S aid, or you're getting if something's happening to you, you can hit the button and the cops will be called and will be immediately dispatched to the location that Uber provides them once you hit the button. And Uber, they also screen. They had Uber does background checks on individuals. They're screening for like any kind of criminal offenses, any kind of felonies. If you have any of these kinds of things, then you can't drive for Uber. So like, I don't really know what else Uber could be doing to stop these things from happening. I think they're being very responsible. They're being very respectable, and they're doing everything they can to do to stop these acts in their tracks. I don't know what else you people expect from Uber.
Yeah, but another thing that was a part of that document that was so interesting to me is that Uber, obviously, right, they were operating in countries where they were not properly licensed, and they would be kind of rated by these countries, right? So this is how crazy Uber was. Like they had offices, right, in all these different countries, like mostly European countries where they were not licensed, and all this stuff was allegedly happening under its founder, Travis Kalanick, when he was sort of the CEO, and he was the head of Uber at the time. Obviously, he stepped down quite a bit, quite a few years ago after the whole incident where he was arguing with one of the drivers, which, in my opinion, he didn't even really say anything that was that bad, but the public kind of didn't really like him too much to begin with, and it looked like he lost a lot of allies within the company, so that's kind of why they overthrew him and got him out of there. Just looked like a really good reason to get him out of there. They kind of spun that whole story, but my main thing that I wanted to bring up here is that Uber's offices, like in these countries where they weren't licensed to be able to, you know, to have to operate as ride providers, or as like dispatchers, they would get raided by the local authorities. So in response to that, Uber actually developed, according to their internal documents obtained by the Guardian, Uber's lawyers say in writing, allegedly, that they developed a kill switch to cut off access to the company's main data systems, and that was done to prevent authorities from properly going through the channels of gathering evidence. And in this document, the Guardian says that it suggested that it was done 12 times during raids that happened in Europe. So it just shows like the crazy extents that they went to stop fucking the authorities from just seizing like information on them and some of the other stuff that they were doing, which I find like to be kind of fascinating because it just shows what lengths like they would go to kind of like cover their own ass as a company.
So they're basically there's basically, you're saying there's much more than these 500 reports, but they were like deleted off servers and such, and the police or whoever was investigating couldn't get access to these reports.
Well, there were two main headlines with Uber this week. One was the 500 claims. The other was that Uber was, according to leaked documents from The Guardian, on a separate note, Uber was operating in countries and in cities where it wasn't properly licensed to do so. And in the cities and specifically municipalities where they were not licensed to do so, they would get frequently raided by the authorities, right? And in the offices that they had within those jurisdictions. And in those offices, they had access to information that, of like drivers being dispatched to pick people up and shit like that. So they built in a kill switch to delete everything and wipe the servers while they were being raided. Or like if they knew they were going to be raided, they would just hit the kill switch and it would wipe all the information that said that they were conducting, like their ride, what would you say, like ride sharing, business or like taxi business. So they would like wipe the documents that showed that they were doing business in that like specific area, which is like pretty obvious that they're doing business because they have a fucking office there, right? Like it's not like a company's not going to set up an office in wherever the fuck, like West Bumblefuck, if they're not doing business there. It's just
Well,
silly. It's a waste of time.
you know what? I'm gonna defend Uber one more time, because there was this paper written in by Science Direct. It was written by this guy Brian S. Weber, right? And basically, what he did was he investigated, some cities where Uber is very prominent and gives a lot of rides, like San Francisco, New York, Chicago. He did this study across, different cities where Uber has a lot of drivers. And what he found was that basically the introduction of Uber in the city, it led to a significant reduction of personal crimes by 5% in the city, or basically 43 personal crimes a month or 41 assaults. They paint Tesla as this all bad company and figure, but they don't look at, they're blaming Tesla for these crashes, but they're not looking at the fact that how many crashes did Tesla prevent? How many SAs did Uber prevent in this regard by basically stopping women from taking public transportation and stopping this from happening?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I'm not particularly against Uber at all. I kind of like the innovation as a company, but the whole point of like the Guardian internal document is to kind of show what lengths they went to kind of crush the traditional legacy, like taxi driving, I guess infrastructure is how I would describe it. Like the fact that they went to lobbying, they went to operating illegally, the fact that they went to, I mean, like I said, dispatching drivers to areas where they knew that taxi drivers were rioting in hopes that the driver, whoever, like when you think about that from the standpoint of what was going on, it's like, yeah, obviously they're just like pouring gasoline on the fire. Like you know, they wanted like a taxi driver to attack the guy driving the Uber, right? And then what would happen is the media would sensationalize it and they'd be like, look at these crazy radical fucking taxi driver animals attacking our poor Uber drivers. Like, in a way, it's kind of fucked up because you're putting your own people or the people that work for your company in harm's way for the sole reason of like making the other side look bad, where like lobbying would probably be just suffice because all these politicians are corrupt anyway. So if you just pay them off, you'll just get what you want anyway. So I don't even understand why you wouldn't about doing it that way. Just silly.
Yeah, I think that whole story is basically sensationalized, and it's made out to be more than it actually is. But you were talking about how these people were rioting a minute ago. There's people in China that are rioting because there is these bank runs on these rural bank companies, and basically $5 billion of clients' funds have been frozen, and there's all these protests and such in the streets in these rural provinces such as Henyan. I don't know if I said that correctly, but basically four banks. They froze money at four banks, and these funds have been frozen for over 3 months. So what are your thoughts? Do you think these people are going to get their money back in China?
I heard a little bit about this stuff. I've been trying to really get more information, but of course, as we know, the CCP, they have their great firewall, as everyone calls it, and they have a very good filter to stop very important, pressing information from getting out to the general public and to more specifically democracies at large. So the main information that I was able to gather is that I saw that there were 50 cities in particular that were affected, 50 in mainland China. you mentioned that 5 billion number. I will just go to the length of saying this. That 5 billion number could very well be the number, right? But we know from China's track record, they like to overstate things when it's good, and they like to understate things when they're bad. Here are my two main examples of China doing that. For the longest time, China was boasting 12% year over year GDP growth. Do you think that that was happening? I don't think so. I think if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. That's number one. And then in number two, in the case of COVID, China was saying that less people died than actually died, which was pretty clear because they wouldn't have went out of their way to build and assemble these incinerators and put them in cities if enough people weren't dying. You don't just build an incinerator if there's only a few people dying, right? Or whatever the case would be. So they obviously falsify the numbers of the people who died or the people who caught COVID. And then the other thing is that they also covered up the spread of the virus, which ultimately led to the global outbreak, global pandemic happening. So I don't think that they're to be trusted with some of this information. I think that realistically, uh, we would have to kind of see what sort of Western financial institutions and really European financial institutions with large interests in China, like what number they come up with as like a like a collective number. But even so, especially if they're not publicly traded companies, they don't really have to disclose that information. So we really have to try to find out if that 5 billion number is accurate. But from what I gather, what's going on is that people are just not paying their mortgages, and it's a big fucking problem over there. And obviously, that trickled down to the American economy. We have plenty of companies here that have business interests in China. One of Warren Buffett's best friends, Charlie Munger, he constantly preaches how he loves China and he loves some of the things going on there. He has a lot of money invested in China. I'm not too sure about the Chinese housing market, but I know he does have a lot of money invested in China. So China is like a main player in this whole geopolitical stage, and then the global economy obviously is a main manufacturer of goods. So if people aren't paying their mortgages, and there is some type of slowdown, and there is some type of production output halts, that can happen. That will be much worse than China operating under the zero tolerance COVID policy. That remains to be seen. And it's something we have to keep an eye on, and we definitely have to watch moving forward because, like I said, they have a tendency to understate when things are bad and overstate when things are good. And that's something that, to me, points to the fact that the regime cannot be trusted. There are certain people that will live within the country who are not afforded the same rights as other people, and they're a totalitarian regime. So, truthfully, I don't like trusting anything that they put out. So, I want to see what the data comes out from. Hopefully, an amalgamation of data comes out or a collective figure kind of comes out, a ballpark number at least, from Western or financial institutions that are held to more rigid and transparent structures than a totalitarian oppressive regime.
Yeah, and the thing was too with these riots, information came out. They when COVID started, right? They had Chinese citizens had to download these apps on their phone, and it basically would send location data to the Chinese so that they could monitor crowds and how many people are in each area. So basically their theory was it would like help stop the spread of COVID if they had all these location data and they basically monitored the people in this process. So now with these bank runs, what they were doing was in order to stop these riots from happening, they use this COVID app to basically a way to crowd control the people and find out who's rioting and such by looking at the location data of the citizens in the area by looking at the phone.
Yeah, I'll just say this too because I don't know if you knew about this, but China, a lot of people don't know this. They actually have facial recognition software. So in the case of like, let's say you jaywalk, right? Like jaywalking is obviously illegal. It's illegal in China as well. So if you get caught jaywalking and you get caught on facial recognition software, they'll just credit your bank account for the fine amount. that you accrued in jaywalking. So like let's say the fine for jaywalking is $100, they'll see your face, they'll scan your face, they don't have to look at any ID. They'll say, "Oh, that's God," and then they'll literally just hit $100. They'll go shoop, and you pull it right from your account. So actually, use the wrong term that they would like debit your account technically because it's an expense. But anyway, yeah, they just hit your account. They don't have to look at any IDs. They don't have to verify that it's you. They know it's you just from the facial recognition software, and they have access to your bank account, so they can just delete the money in 2 seconds, which is obviously unconstitutional, obviously a violation of the Fourth Amendment. But they're not Americans, so they're not bound by that. They're bound by whatever rules their oppressive regime feels like doing on that specific day. So it's just what it is.
Yeah, I mean, China is an oppressive country. There's many oppressive countries in the world too. With Saudi Arabia, we just saw Biden go over to Saudi Arabia, and he went on this tour, and he was caught giving a fist bump to Saudi Arabia. And the reason that he gave the fist bump to Saudi Arabia supposedly is that he didn't want to be seen shaking hands. Now, in my book, right, a fist bump says that you're friends with the person, that you're their brother, that you're close to them. That's more close than a handshake and such. So I think basically what's happening now is Biden's going over to Saudi Arabia because he's got to do a little bit of kissing ass to get these oil prices down, because Saudi Arabia has the cheapest price to produce crude oil. If you look at prices to produce crude oil on a global scale, Saudi Arabia produces crude oil for only $2.80, while the United States, it costs them $30 to produce crude oil. So, Saudi Arabia can make a profit with oil prices very, very, very fucking low. And, it's the lowest place in the world to make a profit. So Biden is going over there to basically convince Saudi Arabia to up their output and convince other members of OPEC to up their output because of the recent events in Russia with their shutdown of the Nord Stream 1 pipeline to Germany, and the fact that it was shut down for maintenance, and we don't know if it's going to be extended for a longer period of time. We saw Putin come out on the news and say that the shutdown of the pipeline is going to depend on sanctions, and it's going to depend on demand for oil. So Russia is basically trying to keep the price of oil elevated or up. So, Biden's trying to counteract that with production of or selling more Saudi Arabia oil. But another issue, right? We see Saudi Arabia coming in and investing a lot of money into golf, and they started this new league, Live, and now there's this debate between should members of the PGA Tour join this new league and the moral implications of joining this new league. And I was just wondering your thoughts on this new Saudi Arabian league and whether or not they should be reprimanded for joining this league, and whether they bear any more responsibility for joining this league.
Yeah, the new league is going to be interesting. I know that the PGA is not very happy about certain players going and playing over there. I think that I want to say Phil Mickelson is in some trouble because he's actually going to play in this league, and he got like a payment. Also, the other thing is that I saw Tiger Woods was implicated in this somehow. It looks like okay. Here we go. I just found this.
We turned down $800 million, Tiger Woods, to play in this league.
He turned down 800 million.
Yeah, he was offered 800 million guaranteed to play in this league. He turned it down.
Wow, it looks like Phil Mickelson was reportedly paid 200 million to be the star attraction of the Rebel Live Golf Tour. And it says whose major shareholder is the PIF, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia. That is pretty crazy. So, Phil Mickelson, I guess he's playing there and he got 200 million and he said, "Fuck it, I don't care." I guess money talks, bullshit walks, but it's been very chaotic, and I'm very curious to see because the PGA Tour suspended. Here we go. This is from per Axios here. It says the PGA Tour suspended 17 players who are taking part in this week's inaugural Live event, and any player who takes part in future events will face the same punishment. I know Trump actually welcomed this Live Tour, and he says that he's going to welcome them to play at his clubs and his different courses. So I imagine that they'd probably play at Mar-a-Lago at some point. He welcomed them in New Jersey to play there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. In terms of, a monopoly, right? The PGA Tour is a monopoly, right? They have no competition really in the US, and there should be another league. There should be a competitive league. So for the PGA Tour to kind of stop people, I mean, I guess you could argue that if there are players who are like official, it would be like if a guy signed in the NBA to the Knicks, and during that time he decides he wants to play in Europe and whatever the Euro League. Like, yeah, I guess the NBA does kind of have precedent, but the whole thing is that when the guy isn't playing in tournaments and it's kind of, you know, after the Masters and like kind of chilling, it's his free time. So unless there's some type of restrictive agreement, I don't see any reason why that guy couldn't fucking play in both leagues. It doesn't really make any sense to me. But particularly with older golfers, like the older golfers, they should go for it. Like, why not? Like Phil Mickelson, the whole thing with him is that he actually got suspended from the PGA Tour, and he lost a lot of sponsors because he actually made a comment that was very critical of Saudi Arabia. If you remember, he was basically someone asked him about how he felt about the whole Jamal Khashoggi thing, and he was like, "Oh, he got fucking whacked," and then he took their money anyway. So it just shows you that he doesn't give a flying fuck. That's number one. But number two, I guess Saudi Arabia forgave him or something, or I don't know what happened. Maybe they threatened him
Well, I
allegedly,
mean,
but he ended up getting 200 million, so he doesn't give a flying fuck. Clearly.
I don't think Saudi Arabia forgave him. I think they remembered that, and now they're trying to make a fool or an ass of him. Because if you look at what they're doing with Biden, they're posting pictures of Biden basically fist pumping them, shaking their hands, and then on the other minute, the crown prince is saying, "Oh, Biden is senile. Biden has lost his mind. Biden is this," and they're making a fool or a mockery of him by, you know, him going there and basically submitting to the king and looking like he's the almighty and the all powerful. But the question here is, if someone offered me 100 million, $200 million, I don't think I would turn it down, even if it was the Saudi Arabian League, because golf, right? You play these tournaments and you only get paid if you win. Like, it's not guaranteed, while the Saudi Arabian money is guaranteed. And you look at sports like golf, tennis, there's no guaranteed money involved. So if you're a player like Phil Mickelson, who's basically over the hump of his career, and he's most likely not going to win any more Masters or any more like major tournaments worth this money. I think it's basically a good deal and a better shot to basically take the guaranteed money over the suspected whatever that you might win, but you might not win. And yeah, I think but what Saudi Arabia is going to do is there's going to be implications of them putting pressure with the whole oil situation, where they're going to basically release more oil. And if Biden basically fines the PGA Tour, because I think what the PGA Tour is doing here is very dangerous. They're basically committing a lot of antitrust violations by saying, if you play in this tour in Saudi Arabia, then you're not allowed to play with us. That's basically putting pressure on your employees and trying to assert your dominance as a monopoly, which is insane. They're going to get, I think they're going to get fined for this, and there's going to be a lot of pushback on this. I don't think we heard the end of this. I think this is just the beginning.
Absolutely. And it just reminds me of the whole situation of like the NFL, right? Remember back in the day, the NFL was battling, this was in the 80s. The NFL was battling with the USFL, which Trump actually owned one of the USFL teams. I think he owned the Generals, and he had Herschel Walker, if you remember. But the whole thing is like, and then this whole thing transpired recently. Like you saw the XFL come back out, and now they're more of a serious league. It's not really kind of ran by the WWE. The Rock kind of bought out the league, resuscitated it, and made it into a legitimate football league that will compete with the NFL, but it will compete in a way that it sort of happens after the Super Bowl. And then like the same thing with the USFL. The USFL came back, they returned. So now you're really seeing that the NFL's monopoly or like full grasp of football at the professional level is really no longer a thing. You're going to see smaller leagues, like even the Arena Football League and some other varying different leagues, kind of step in, and they're building out their own IP and they're kind of coming around. But the main thing is with this league live that a lot of people don't realize is that like Greg Norman is one of the biggest. He's like the front guy, like he's like the lead guy of this live league. And Greg Norman's a Hall of Fame golfer. Like he's no slouch, right? He's designed golf courses. Like he's a bright guy, and the whole thing is that I think that part of him being the front man for this new league is obviously money. Like without a doubt, money I would say is probably number one. But number two is that he actually tried to do something similar. A lot of people don't know this, but he tried to do something similar in like the early 90s or like mid 90s, where he created another thing and he called it like it was a competing entity. It was called like the World Golf Tour. And like the PGA Tour, they pretty much just took it and stole the idea because what happened was like they ended up doing international tournaments. So the PGA Tour at that time was only in the United States, and then it expanded international. They basically just took his idea of like having golf tournaments around the world, and they were like, "Oh, let's just incorporate that into the PGA Tour umbrella," and then they didn't pay anything. So they just stole his idea. So I like totally see where he's coming from, and he's like pissed off about the whole thing. And he's a bright guy, so I'm sure it'll all work out. But I think the PGA's, like you said, the PGA's monopoly. They're violating antitrust laws. I think they're in for a world of trouble. There's a lot of money on the other side of the table, and I think they're going to get squashed like the cockroaches they are, as Kevin O'Leary likes to say.
Well, they're definitely going to get squashed like the cockroaches they are. But here's the thing: what's the alternative? What else can they do if they don't do this? You're competing with an entity that basically doesn't care about profit. They're investing in this league to basically, you know, repair ties between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. There's a political motive to this. It's not tied to them making money, so that's why these golfers are getting paid absorbent amounts of money. It's not because they're going to make money off this league. This league is going to be billions and billions of dollars of loss they're going to have from this league, but it's to repair ties between the United States and Saudi Arabia and make a more favorable impression, make the U.S. citizens have a more favorable impression of Saudi Arabia instead of, when you think Saudi Arabia, you think of terrorists, you think of bad people when you think of Saudi Arabia.
To be frank, you think of 9/11. 10 of the
Right,
12 hijackers were Saudi Arabian. People don't talk about
right.
that.
You think of like people like that. So they're basically trying to repair the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. And that's basically why the PGA Tour is going so hard on this, and they're fighting this, and they're basically acting like a bully and acting like a monopoly because they have no alternative. They're going to be crushed like a cockroach.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. And we're talking on that same topic of Saudi Arabia and natural and gas and oil and everything like that. Africa, fucking Africa, baby. Let's go. Africa is coming around now. So Europe, like you mentioned, the Nord Stream pipeline and how Europe, for the most part, Western Europe is beefing with Russia and all this other bullshit's going on. So now Europe is relying on Africa for natural gas and oil. But there's a weird catch to it that is pretty funny. So the Europeans are insisting that Africa moves away from fossil fuels. So it's this weird thing where like Africa's finally like taking control of their own natural resources and actually using it and engaging in the marketplace without getting like the shit end of the stick. And now Europe's telling them like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. You need to move to renewables. It's like they're finally fucking making money here. Like, what the fuck is going on? Because now for the first time ever, Europe is reliant on Africa and reliant on other places to get oil, and they're not necessarily, and natural gas as well, but they're like not really getting it as much from Russia. So it's very interesting to see that. This is my main question to you is like, do you think that this is Africa's time to kind of like come of age and like finally develop into somewhat of like an industrial power, or like to be able to kind of lift the people out of really that continent, like kind of lift them out of poverty? Like, how do you think that this is going to transpire?
Well, I mean, to be totally frank with you, the problem with some of these African countries or these African leaders is, I don't know if you saw this, but there's these huge palaces, huge palaces that the Chinese are building for these African leaders. And there's a lot of corruption in these African countries that they're siphoning off the money from their materials and the resources. And I don't know if these African countries will ever be rich and come to a new age because of the corruption. You would have to have a strong leader root out the corruption and actually put the money that they're gaining from these resources towards building the country. And making it a putting it in a more favorable position globally, and having it evolve from a frontier country to basically an emerging country. But yeah, that Europe is smart in that regard. In when they said, oh, move off of go to renewables and move off of this and that and that. What they're trying to do is they're trying to convince Africa to move to renewables so that they can buy the oil, because there's only so much oil that they have, and if they're able to reduce Africa's demand domestically, then Africa could export more oil to them. And they're in deep trouble with the Russians shutting down the pipeline and such, and they're in a need for a massive amount of oil. So they're just trying to reduce the demand in Africa by being kind of hypocrites in that sense. But yeah, to answer your original question, I just think there's too much corruption in Africa. I don't think they're ever gonna evolve to be a you know there's too much corruption in the continent of Africa. I don't think the countries that are in that continent are going to evolve to be, superpowers or basically emerging countries. Like, even if you look at Ghana, they got these deals with China where they export materials, and the president, as they call it, they have these huge palaces. They have these huge, gold. They're walking around with gold necklaces and gold chains, and they have gold bars and such, and everything they have is plated with gold. And you have to root out these corruption if you want these countries to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Another thing that people don't really think about is, and I did mention this before, but like specifically the geographical borders and more of like the geopolitical aspect of Africa, in that the borders of these countries, like they were kind of drawn and designed by European settlers, right, and by China. Ooh, excuse me, and by
I
China
bless
and
you.
oh, thank you, God. Thank you. I think that was my first sneeze ever on here. Holy shit. But a lot of the borders of these countries were designed by settlers who don't really obviously know anything about like the local cultures and tribes that would fight with each other. So then you have a situation like the Rwandan genocide, where the Tutsis and the Rwandans were fighting and they were killing each other. You have situations like North and South Sudan, where the Sudanese, in both groups were killing and attacking each other, and there was a massive civil war that happened there. But that's really because it's just like the borders don't mean shit. Because if you have people who are at like the lower portion of North Sudan and they feel like they belong to South Sudan, guess what? They're gonna fucking fight. Like they're gonna be like, fuck this shit. We want to be with the Southern Sudanese. Like we agree more with them. We align more with them.
I mean, if these African countries, right? Just looking at some of them, right, and the instability in them and such. This is how you know there's a lot of corruption. Nigeria, 8 coups. Chad, 6 coups. Burundi, 6 coups. Burkina Faso, 10 coups. So these countries are not the most stable places. A constant fight for power. And the reason why this is constant fight for power is because of the corruption. Is that the winner or whoever takes over this country is going to be very rich, because they're basically siphoning off all of the country's assets into their own bank account and their own pockets when they sell these materials, to these other countries such as China.
And there was this big thing that we really wanted to talk about, and I'll mention it. If you've been paying attention to the news more recently, what's up?
Yeah, what did you want to talk about?
Okay, so this was something that was really big. If you've been paying attention to the news recently, we did talk a little bit about NFTs and some scams and whatever crypto stuff that was going on. But the Bored Apes, there's been this major controversy, and it's really kind of blown up within the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I feel like it's important to kind of talk about this. So more specifically, this is kind of crazy. So the Bored Ape Yacht Club creators, they were accused of being alt-right. And I guess I will say in this sense, falling within the scope of being alt-right is a support for a particular, I guess, racial ideology.
A supporter of the policies of Germany during World War II.
Yes, and a very specific, predominant racial segment of the population. We'll put it that way. So the first thing, and this is pointed to in varying different aspects. So they created these NFTs and people didn't really think anything of it and they thought it was just like a fun fucking project or whatever. These guys end up getting like a $5 billion valuation for their company. Now, this is where this gets really weird because people started noticing things and they started looking into things and they just kept going further and further and further and further and further down the rabbit hole. So these were some of the things that were pointed out that I feel like are worth mentioning. So for one, one of the logos is like a black background. It's a circle. It's a black jagged circle, right? And then it has like an ape skull in the middle of it, and it says Bored Ape Yacht Club. So you don't really think anything of it, right? But it actually is similar to one of the logos from Germany in World War II, and it has 18 teeth in it. It's like literally you could go and look this up online. It's GordonGonner.com. Gordon Gonner is one of the co-founders of Bored Ape Yacht Club. One of the guys that's kind of spoken out in opposition is Rebel Rider, or I think his name is, or something like that. And he basically said that he bought the domain GordonGonner.com so he would rank higher in the search results. So if you look up Bored Ape Yacht Club Gordon Gonner, it's like the top search result on Google, which is hilarious. And it's just him pointing out all these things with the project, right? So the 18 teeth, 18 is it means, you know, the leader of Germany during World War II. We won't say his name for monetization purposes and for the sake of not getting flagged. So yeah, that's what that means. And in the logo, really in the skull of the logo that the Bored Ape Yacht Club is based on, it also has 18 teeth. Makes sense, you know. The next thing that happens is like in one of the clues. So then they created this like elaborate project, right? Where they're like, if you solve all the puzzles, you win a Bored Ape, which is worth obviously hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, you win a cash prize as well. You win all this other shit, right? So one of the clues that they picked of all the chimps, and you're talking about lower hominids, and you're talking about primates. So you're talking about the genus of like potentially hundreds of different variations of chimps that have existed or apes that have existed and lower hominids. The one that they choose is Australopithecus. And that one in particular, if you even look up who found the Australopithecus, it of course was someone related to the aforementioned regime, a scientist. So that was like the second main thing. The third thing is that the project itself, which, God, I'm not sure if you knew about this, but the project itself went live on the anniversary of the death of the the specific leader of Germany during World War II. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I did know that. That the project was, it happened on a specific date. I have a couple of thoughts on this project, and I'm just going to present the antithesis of this argument. Some people might say it's racist. It supports a
Oh, I have a couple more points I wanted to get to.
Oh, okay. Make the points.
All right. All right. It was a rhetorical question. Sorry. But then there was another. Yeah, this is like a pretty uncomfortable topic. But I'm trying to dance around this as best as I can without getting into trouble here. But then another one of the co-founders, he goes by this name Gargamel. And if you remember, I don't know if you remember this from when you were a kid, but like, you ever see the Smurfs, the character Gargamel? It's been like kind of acknowledged that it's a very anti-Semitic depiction of like a Jewish person, and that's like his name. That's what the guy goes by, Gargamel. Okay, so while this guy Gargamel was in college for an undergrad thesis, he wrote about like this particular faction, like a fictional work about them. Then the other thing is that Yuga Labs, the company that created Bored Ape, they said they were inspired by the hash marks, and the company that owns the hash marks goes by a name that was a phrase used, and it was written on the gates of like one of these camps, we'll call it. And then another member goes by the name of SAS, which is SASS, which some believe is an abbreviation for the two divisions of this faction. And then the company that owns Bored Ape is called Yuga Labs, and a common 4chan expression is surfing the Kali Yuga, which means embracing your role as the bad guy, specifically associated with this faction. Another co-founder says he likes Lovecraftian stories in an interview, and Lovecraft was a known person who subscribed to this ideology. And then I guess one of the last points, which is more of a stretch, is that the Bored Ape 1488 has connotations to that. On his jumpsuit, it says 19087. And in cryptography, you're supposed to remove zero. So if you remove the zero, it says 1987, which is like the last year that this guy, who was like the last leader of this faction, died, and he was like the second in command. So, and he died in a prison, so he was wearing an orange jumpsuit, obviously. But those are some of the main points that I felt were necessary to mention. But this whole thing kind of, I mean, I don't know what to make of it. I think people should watch this. I think, who was it, Philion or someone put it out. And it was pretty interesting to read about and to see. I just kind of look at it from the perspective of like, how many coincidences does something have to have before it becomes like, you're like, okay, this is getting weird now, you know? So that's kind of how I look at it. I don't think I could look at any other piece of work or something else and point to that, you know, and say like, oh, there are 10 coincidences or like 5 coincidences that point to this thing being associated or created with this thing in mind, you know? It's very weird.
Right. The additive effect of a whole bunch of coincidences does, or the additive effect of a whole bunch of circumstantial evidence does have some merit. But the question you have to ask in this whole situation is, right, let's accept the premise that the artwork is racist and the artwork supports the philosophies of Germany during the time of World War II, right? Let's just accept the premise, even though it's circumstantial evidence and it's not proven, and the founders of the project did deny these accusations, right? Let's accept that premise through because we have all this circumstantial evidence. The question you have to ask yourself is, right, does artwork have to depict something that you support, or that the founder supports or is in favor of? Or can I make a picture or a painting or a piece of artwork of the devil? Can I make a picture of Bernie Madoff, who I don't support his actions? And I know I'm not comparing these people. These people obviously did not nearly as bad as things. What these pictures are depicting are much worse. I'm not comparing them directly. I'm just giving you this I'm giving you this kind of comparison, as say I'm not comparing them, but I'm kind of am comparing them to basically take the emotion out of it, because you take it when you look at the and when you look at something that's totally at the end of a spectrum, or that's totally extreme, there tends to be a lot of emotion involved. So can I make a picture of, or can I draw a piece of artwork of, let's say, the devil, who's basically somebody I don't support, I don't agree with, and say it's just a piece of artwork, and it's basically telling history, or it's telling the history of like creation and history of founding, and telling the story of like the archangel Gabriel and such? Can I draw the picture of him even though I don't support the actions of the devil?
Yeah, so my rebuttal is obviously you can. No one's really disputing that. But I think the main problem is that it's intellectually dishonest to lead people into potentially buying something or supporting a project where they don't know that that is the unintended, like there's sort of this unintended consequence of like, you're buying into something, you like what they're doing, but you don't understand the undertones or like the lesser known hidden meanings behind things. And I think that's a big problem with symbolism and particularly certain imagery, is that a lot of people, if you're not really like a history buff or you're not into that sort of thing, you're not going to know too much about it. So in a way, it's like, is very intellectually dishonest regardless of the intent of the artist, you know. It's like, it's like if there was, you know, something with baseball and I reference like pitching a no hitter, but you don't know anything about baseball and you think it's cool, but like you wouldn't know anything about pitching a no hitter if you're not like privy to baseball terms, or like, you know, or like an infield shift or like an outfield shift. Like you wouldn't really know anything about that unless you knew about the intricacies of baseball. So like you could buy a baseball painting, but if it's depicting like an infield shift and you don't really know anything about that, but I might know stuff about that because I know more about baseball or I understand the concept of that. You know, that painting or whatever, that art might have more value to me than you because you're just like a normie in that like sort of culture like that around the painting or whatever the case may be. So in what I'm saying is like, in the case of the point that you were making is that, you know, you're talking about something depicting Bernie Madoff or the devil or whatever the case may be, like some type of antagonistic figure. In that case, it would be at the forefront, right? Like it wouldn't be something that's like tucked away, or in this case, like hidden sort of imagery that most people wouldn't understand or like pick up on. But these are instances where, you know, these things aren't very prevalent, and if they were, I'm certain that people would make a point of to talk about it, and it wouldn't, the controversy, when you think about it, it wouldn't be a thing, because if it was at the forefront, people would already know about it, and what would there be to talk about, right? You know, in your case, where you're talking about imagery of the devil or Bernie Madoff, you mentioned, like that's at the forefront, right? So like if you have a picture of the devil, everyone that has a brain could go, oh, that's the devil, or like, oh, that's Bernie Madoff, and like they know about it. But in the case of this, you know, the hidden imagery is why there is a controversy to begin with, because people were led to believe that it was just a bunch of pictures of apes that are NFTs, and like that's it, like randomly generated apes. But it doesn't look like that's the case, you know?
Right. I get what you're saying, but here's my counterpoint to that, right? Um, Before, at the start of this argument, you presented all these facts about, these soldiers, these different groups, these hats, these symbolism and such. I bet before this project, you didn't know the history of this symbolism, and you didn't know this. So would you say by basically creating this public outrage and creating this sort of like by hiding the symbolism and causing this public outrage, and that the fact that hate draws controversy, and the fact that by having a project of this magnitude and this scale, you're basically reaching more people and teaching them about the history of Germany and the history of what happened during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair to say. Like, there's that whole educational aspect of it where people are learning about it. But I like the
Oh,
fact that I like the fact that I learned about it, because now I know to kind of look at things through a different scope. Like, these are things that I guess you would say are kind of, you know, fall within the scope of naivete, at least for me, because I'm not really too privy about a lot of this stuff. I mean, I only really know like what I've seen on History Channel, or like what I read in books, or whatever,
right,
or
right,
what
right.
I've like read in my own
That's
research. So I guess in my take, I would say that now I know what these things mean, and now I know that if there's anything else going on, whether that be movies or any type of media or art or whatever the case may be, now I know to kind of look for this stuff and to avoid it, because I don't. It's
right.
not necessarily anything that I subscribe to or agree with. So
Right, that's totally understandable that you didn't know about the symbolism beforehand. I don't think a lot of people knew about the history and the symbolism beforehand. Now, if someone was smart enough to create this artwork and hide all the symbolism in a piece of artwork, don't you think that they could have basically had the intelligence or the fortitude to know that it would eventually be solved, and that the masses would eventually learn about the history of this, and they would learn about what happened during this time? And don't you think that basically the founders of this artwork could be doing that on purpose to basically teach somebody about history? Because we all know a lot of people aren't reading books, a lot of people aren't learning through traditional means, and by creating this piece of artwork, you're reaching a younger demographic and teaching them about a topic that they might not understand or they might not know. So it's like a different way to reach people.
I think that's a very valid point, but one of the main things that I brought up was that term surfing the Kali Yuga. That term specifically is thrown around quite a bit on 4chan, and it's a very negative term. So, in that sense, you know, it suggests at least that
What does that term mean? Surfing the cow.
it's sort of just the rough translation of it just means like embracing your role as the bad guy, but more specifically in the scope of the faction we're referring to. So in that sense, like that term, and for them to use the word Yuga like that, and then to cite that they were fans of one project, the hash marks and the creators of the hash marks used, that company is named after a quote that was written at one of these camps on a wall, and also is like a common trope from this specific organization that doesn't exist anymore. I think that it kind of suggests that it's really just sort of like 4chan trolls just kind of saying things or doing things to be edgy. Like there's this weird type of subculture, at least on 4chan, where, and in certain pockets of the internet, where it's just sort of like postmodernism in the form of like irony, where like people who are like very liberal or like very progressive will come out and they'll sort of label the other side as people who fall within extremists of the group we're referring to. And there's like a faction of people who are more moderate or just trolls that will embrace that side of it. And we saw that with the He Will Not Divide Us campaign with Shia LaBeouf, where, you know, they had people who would go to this He Will Not Divide Us camera and they would say, like, like, fuck you, insert name of faction from World War II that was defeated. And then people would show up in like the uniforms of that faction on camera. They didn't do that because they embraced the values or the rhetoric of the faction, but they did that to troll the people who were calling them that, even though they're not that. So it became like I said, it's a weird form of like postmodernism irony that people on the internet embrace. And I believe that's the most logical explanation, is that it's just people fucking around and just doing that to be edgy or because they find it humorous.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. You'd have to talk to basically the founder of Yuga Labs and the creators of Yuga Labs to find out their true intentions behind it. They very well could be racist people, and you would have to do a deep dive on their background and such to find out what their true intentions are. But I do think before you cast a stone and throw people under the bus and such, you should be doing your due diligence. You shouldn't immediately destroy someone's reputation and destroy somebody's career unless you're totally certain that they support these actions.